we're gonna restart this intro. This is a new format that's on YouTube for co-guests, guys. So welcome to the first episode of the Beyond the Headlines, guys, live show. This is the live premiere for our live version, which we do it every single Friday at 3 p.m. Eastern. We are, of course, 20 minutes late because, in fact, we are boomers. We were making that joke last time, and then we had no audio because we were still messing up. But we got a great show lined up for everybody today. So we're going to be talking CIA Blacksites with relating all the way back to the late 1990s and the early 2000s with Dianne Feinstein. We're going to be going into Joe Biden and backstabbing all of his voters with the entire wall initiative and climate policies. We're going to be jumping into Trump, obviously the trials, the indictments, and him potentially taking House Speaker. And then we're going to end this with a bang, getting into geopolitics with the Wagner Group and Yevgeny Prigozhin in obviously not only his plane crash, but what's taking place in South Africa, in Africa as a whole, actually. So, Samuel Arms, welcome to the stream. How are you feeling? That was a whole process.
Yeah, it was, but it's always like that. I feel like anytime, it's just funny because we're both in tech, and I always joke with people that often we're talking about these complex issues, and then I can't freaking figure out how to work PowerPoint when I'm at someone's house or something. I'm like, damn it. But it's all good. So yeah, it's interesting because you have certain weeks that are slow in the media cycle and certain weeks that are like everything, whatever's the quote, that sometimes it takes, centuries for history to happen. That happens in a day. I know I butchered that one, but we have some pretty interesting things that happened this week. And where do you want to start off? You want to start off with what we're seeing at the CIA?
Yeah, so I will flip the camera around just a second. Let's start off there. That's a great lead, and I think everybody's going to want to know about that. So that's what I cover a lot here. So I'm going to try this, guys. I might break YouTube flipping my camera because this new setup is wild, and it worked. This is awesome. So here we go. We have Raymond J. De Souza. Don't know how to pronounce the last name. Probably butchering that. But Dianne Feinstein should be remembered for her epic battle against CIA torture. Now, I'm going to be very cautious with this on YouTube because I know that they love the good old friends at the Intelligence Committee. But the CIA fought ferociously to hide what it had done in the aftermath of 9/11. But this senator would not be intimidated. So this is actually a really cool story that she's been a part of, and this actually did take place. But on Thursday, the Democratic Party will gather in San Francisco for the funeral of the late Senator Dianne Feinstein. A lot of you know her because man, she probably should not have been in her position at that late stage of her life. But she still had a lot of accomplishments over time. And this one specifically is just a wild story. And so in 1984, the Democratic National Convention went to San Francisco. Then Mayor Feinstein was a contender to be chosen as the vice presidential nominee, the first woman to be a national ticket. The choice went to Geraldine Ferraro of New York. But Feinstein and her San Francisco Democrats obviously were on the ascendancy. Now, what I want to jump down to here, though, is in the aftermath of 9/11, for you guys that don't know, the war on terror included Guantanamo Bay and CIA Blacksites, secret facilities that were the protections of U.S. law were limited. And sorry, where the protections of the U.S. law were limited. And a lot of you guys have seen my videos on this. These Blacksites are where we really would just pick up random people across the world with no evidence and no reason. And we would just take them there and essentially torture them. The CIA has actually had to pay multiple lawsuits and multiple settlements that aren't disclosed for the number of the payouts and settlements, but where they actually got caught and were taking families and literally just torturing them in these chambers for no reason. It's kind of like, I don't know, gives me World II Hitler vibes with what they were doing in their camps. So yeah, what are your thoughts on this? If you have any, Sam, this is kind of coming obviously out of the 2004. Bush is obviously in presidency. Before we hopped on the live, you mentioned that Democrats definitely favored Bush in many ways. Where do you stand?
Yeah, so I think the one thing the chat needs to remember is that we see changing dynamics based on who's in power, and often whoever is not in power has a negative interpretation of anyone in the administrative office. So if you go back to 2003, 2005, and you look at polls of Democrats and Republicans, the amount in which they support the CIA, Republicans actually were really favorable in voting for the CIA. If you just look at like how much they support the CIA in general, up until like 2012 and 2016, Republicans were the predominant people who were like, we love the CIA. And it used to be Democrats who were super anti-CIA, and Feinstein was kind of the lead on that. Even though you had this kind of wave of post 9/11, everyone unites, Republicans and Democrats, and they're all essentially for the Bush agenda, which Bush entirely wasted that agenda on useless things, I think. But essentially, everyone was like, okay, we're going to back whatever Bush wants. Feinstein was one of the few because back at the time there was probably like 20% of Democrats who viewed the CIA favorably. She was one of the few who was actually doing work and saying, okay, I don't trust these people. I don't necessarily support the war effort. Let's figure out what the CIA is doing. If you flip that script now, one of the reasons this is so important, I think, is now Democrats are overwhelmingly supportive for the CIA as opposed to Republicans who have completely dropped off and don't trust it at all. And that shows you like the total switch in power. Dianne Feinstein is 90 years old, right? And so kind of this dynamic of her pursuit against the CIA just kind of shows you how politics changes over time. It's kind of crazy for us to think about. 2003 was 20 years ago, right? And a lot can happen in 20 years. In 20 years, we've had Bush, Obama, Trump, and now Biden, right? So it's kind of interesting. I think overall, though, even though Democrats right now are more supportive of the CIA, both parties generally have a mistrust. And even if like they're more supportive by, let's say, 31% than Republicans, like at the height, Republicans is like a faction supported the CIA at like 60%. So there's an overall decline trend line, but this trust in the CIA tends to follow whoever is in and out of power, depending on what party is kind of positioning their favorability.
Yeah, and so a news article that just came out comes from the CIA wanted Trump out of office because he recognized the deep state. And this is coming from a former CIA agent himself on Fox News. And yes, you're going to want to take that lightly, but of course they're going to get the inside scoop. Says intelligence agencies try to prevent Trump from holding off his office. And not necessarily that Trump was attacking them, but if you just look historically, the CIA intelligence hold a massive power. The military-industrial complex with the CIA combined is a powerhouse that people really don't know how deep their ties actually go and how much control they have in this narrative. And if you look back to just the beginning of the CIA back in the 1945, about when it was starting to be developed, the CIA initially started off straight up with psychological warfare. Moving into obviously the Huck Revolution in the Philippines after they pushed the Japanese out, moving into Vietnam, leading up to the Bay of Pigs and Operation Mongoose with Edwards Lansdale. And so, that momentum has pushed to today's age, and they're much more open about this. They opened up a new sector called NED in, I think it was the 1980s. It could have been late 1970s, but I want to say it was like 1983. And I actually just had a video taken down on this, and it's not because I'm spreading any form of misinformation. It's just a very sensitive topic, and actually causing color revolutions in places like Indonesia right now, or Malaysia, or all over the world. And they're much more open about this, and the agency is like blatantly. They just throw it out there. It's all truth. It's all undisclosed documents. It all comes directly from CIA unreleased declassified documents through the Freedom of Information Act. But we still get a lot of black-siding and blacklining in these documents. And black sites, for you guys that don't know, they still exist today. We actually don't know how many exist. And where we're going to lead into this next conversation, but Dianne Feinstein, she was actually one of, I believe, the 8 politicians and Congress officials that are on the Committee of Oversight that are supposed to oversee the CIA. Now, legally, though, this is where you get a very kind of imbalanced conflict of interest, because whoever's in office as president can actually veto and bypass the committee's intelligence. So the CIA doesn't necessarily have to give them all of the intelligence that they are gaining. And over time, the laws that were created in the 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s, etc., technology is advanced. And so things like drones actually, and I'm sure the UFO technology, if you want to get down that road, but it's much easier to evade a lot of the laws that were in place. And the CIA is able to collect more data and more intelligence without having to ever send the information to these committees. So very interesting to see take place, and you see that they continue to be a powerhouse. It's why I don't think Kennedy Man, I'm honestly, it shocks me that Kennedy doesn't have Secret Service. I don't know if it's because of social media. Like, if anything were ever to happen to him, it would cause, I don't know, maybe some civil war type issues. Because that'd be a trilogy that his family would be a part of. And so, I don't know if you have any closing thoughts on that, but yeah, the CIA is still a powerhouse today, guys, and you can't ignore it.
No, to answer Crypto Dream's question, we actually, last time I checked, we have 17 intelligence agencies.
That we know of.
17, put that number down, 17, right? The CIA, correct, is traditionally outside the US. You have the FBI, which is supposed to be within the US, but you have FBI offices outside the US. You have CIA offices within the US. You have the Department of Homeland Security, which is supposed to focus on the border, so in between the outside and the inside, but they do operations in both. You have the NSA, but then you have even smaller departments, and that doesn't include military intelligence. Every military department, from the Air Force to even to the Navy to the Army, will all have their own specialized intel departments, right? So it almost becomes this giant fiefdom. One of the theories around 9/11 is that these intel agencies just weren't sharing information, even though we had the whole picture put together. The CIA is always going to be tricky because part of the issue is always going to be how much information should everybody know. Congress does have a right to know information, but if Congress knows, so does everybody else, right? And so if you're by definition trying to do covert operations, how does that ruin that? So the CIA, I think, will always kind of have this mythology of like fishiness and creepy and what are they actually up to. And the fun note to leave on would be the president of Germany is going to meet with Biden, I think this weekend or next weekend. And the most important person who's going to be there is the head of the CIA. So why does the head of the CIA really need to be there? Is he the one who needs to be there instead of Biden? But they need Biden to show up so it doesn't look so sketchy, right?
Is Biden
That's
actually showing up? Because I saw that.
He's showing up in the news. I don't know if he's actually showing up in person.
Interesting. Yeah,
so you can read little tea leaves like that, and like we'll never know, really. But you see little things like that, and you just have to ask, why is the CIA got to be there? Who isn't there? Why aren't any of the other intel agencies there? Or maybe they are, and they're just not telling us.
Yeah, well, the one thing that we do know is that Joe Biden's been backstabbing his voters constantly, repetitively, and bending them over a curb and, having his way with them for the last 4 years. And most recently, after touting against Trump's administration, and love or hate Trump, guys, that's not what this conversation is about. It's about what's taking place, what are the conversations being had. And it was just last week. Biden's making jokes about how, if Mexico had known they were only going to have to build 56 miles of wall, maybe they would have actually paid for it. And just bashing on Trump's administration for his immigration policies. Well, turns out that we don't have just immigration issues. It's not a crisis. We have like a full-blown invasion. We had a day of 50,000, I believe, maybe it was 250,000. I think it was 50,000 Venezuelan immigrants, primarily men, that tried to break through our border the other day, and they were like, "All right, we can't do this anymore. We literally have no more room." Because once it was like 100 people coming in, and it was 1,000 people coming in, and all of a sudden, guys, in these third world countries, it's like, hey, the U.S. borders are wide open. And Biden comes out, guys, and after being so against immigration policies from Trump, Biden failed miserably, and he is now open up and building the wall. He is finishing the wall in Texas, and so yeah, Sam. I mean, this is something you've been covering probably for a very long time. This is obviously going to go against all of his environmentalists, his public health, voting, his all of his voters, his climate activists, his environmentalists, his immigration. I would say immigrants are probably going to fall under those policies, but he's literally going against a majority of his voter base.
Yeah, it's really tricky because if you're looking at the strategy of the border crisis, you can kind of understand, okay, so you could imagine a basic strategy is you let more immigrants in, you legalize them, and then you get their votes. And if you think that's a Democrat or Republican thing, Republicans have done that as well, where they've granted amnesty, and then normally whoever is the president who grants that amnesty will often claim those votes, right? So it's kind of like this game of who can pump more voters in. But now what's happening is because Republicans in Texas and Florida are saying, okay, you want these open borders? We're shipping them to your cities. So now to the point of New York City is stressed even more than it already is. Denver, Colorado, I read the funniest article. Denver, Colorado is putting out pamphlets trying to tell immigrants not to come because the rent's too high and expensive. So they're trying, that's like the most progressive thing to do, is to say we want to open our homes to immigrants and then be like, but it's too expensive in our district. Go to somewhere where it's cheaper. Yeah,
Go to New York where taxpayers are paying $12 billion, for the
correct.
next 3 years just to house them, shelter them, and feed them.
So they could have
Um,
worked with this strategy, and they could have left the border wide open as long as they wanted to, but now it's hurting their constituency. So it's really easy to have open borders as long as it's not hurting you personally. And that's the common saying. I mean, I think we saw multiple times when crime's getting out of hand and people are like, oh, the rioters are actually good people. And then it's their neighborhood that starts getting beat up. And they're like, hey, someone call the police. You know, it's the same kind of logic there. So now Biden's stuck to where he literally doesn't have an alternative. He's going to have to build the wall. He's going to have to start deporting people, I bet you, because he's going to get demand from Democratic mayors who are the ones who are handling the majority of these
yeah, they
new
already started
immigrants.
deporting too. They already started deporting.
Yep, yep. I saw that,
Uh,
and I don't even know they said of Venezuelans. I guarantee you, most of them aren't even Venezuelans. I was looking up the trafficking route, and a lot of it's going to be Asians and Africans who I think they fly to somewhere in Turkey, and then Turkey to South America, and then they begin to march upward. And that's also just one of the costs of cheap travel, is just people being able to access this for, although a lot of times the travel will be paid for by NGOs. And that's another dirty little secret, is you have little NGOs all over the world funding a lot of these journeys for people. And then you dive into, well, who's funding the NGOs, which is just a whole nother rabbit hole.
yeah, yeah. I mean, and immigration is a controversial topic, but from my perspective, it's actually you need immigration. That's like in America specifically with demographics, like immigration is what keeps us at a 2.1 return on people replacing the next generation, and that's what's going to allow us to scale manufacturing. That's going to allow us to move from the globalization to regionalism and allow manufacturing with China, with Canada and Mexico. And it's actually really good for your economy if you do it in the right way. So hopefully this next presidency will actually see some good policies out of this, because bouncing back and forth with amnesty, like you mentioned, and just completely 180 just for votes is going to hurt the economy long term a lot more than it would actually help and incentivize more production here. Because there's a lot of good people that are trying to come and build and just create lives out here, and it's we are still the number one country in the world, number one GDP. So there's a lot of positives to it, and it's unfortunate that becomes such a political debate or a political dilemma when you guys, the people arguing this don't even understand the fundamental economics behind what immigration policy actually implement on a geopolitical scale. Which moves us kind of into our next conversation here, which is going to be obviously, the House Speaker, right? This is the big. The House Speaker is, I think, the third largest, power in the United States
Yeah,
government,
number
correct?
three in succession.
Yeah, so because of the power of being able to pass what they want and don't want, essentially within bills in the House. And so Trump kind of came out and made the joke, and it's again genius marketing. This is a man that's being dragged through the dirt for defrauding and frauding, and they're going to probably get him. It might take 3-4 years, but they're going to do everything in their power to get him on something. And so now coming into the House during this trial, not only I think could help because he could still run for presidency as the House Speaker. He can actually now use this to his advantage and decide to push and gain support in many different ways in a strategic manner. Because if Democrats want something to get passed through, they have to go through good old sugar daddy Trump. So very interesting outlook. I still think it's a very low probability, but it's not, in this world, I wouldn't be shocked if I saw it happen.
Yeah, and I talked about this at length in my last YouTube video. It certainly, Trump as Speaker of the House would make things really exciting. And I would actually find something like that really fun. Like, I would love to see him to be Speaker. I mean, it would energize and create just so much more in the media hype cycle. You'd really just see them kind of clash with Biden more immediately. But you're right. Like, in Trump's position, he could simply just say, we're not passing a bill to fund anything, right? Because you guys are so corrupt, it's not happening. I mean, Speaker of the House is the one who fundraises, which Trump's great at, which is what Kevin McCarthy was very good at. He's the one who sets the rules, who helps push the votes on those rules. They appoint committee chairs and committee heads. It'd be very practical, and he could still run for president. He could still run for president. He could still collect checks. I always tell people if you're under criminal investigation, the best thing to do is run for office. All right. And that's what a lot of these people do. I mean, just look at George Santos right now. He's taking the advantage of he's not stepping down. He's having Democrats and Republicans call him step down. He's like, nope. And it's probably because he knows he's safer in Congress. And as long as you spin the story correctly, it can actually help embolden you and your voters. So yeah, like I don't think it's too likely, but I think if Trump wanted to, he could. And my guess, if I was in Trump's shoes and I wanted to, he'd have to play a tricky line between essentially being like, they made me become Speaker of the House. I didn't want to. I want to support someone, but they voted. I didn't control the vote. And now you look like this empowered, emboldened person who has to do it. Because if he says I want to do it, then he's going to have Vivek. Then he's going to have DeSantis be like, "Oh, I thought you were running for president," right?
So
And people
to
might get
that note,
comfortable with him being speaker and be like, just stay speaker or let someone else be president.
yeah. So apparently, and this is coming from Jonathan Karl, ABC News, but Trump apparently is endorsing Representative Jim Jordan and said he'd be
Yes.
open to taking the job himself on a temporary basis. So using that strategy. In reporting from this guy's upcoming book, though, he says that he learned that Trump had secretly already plotted to be elected speaker back in January when he was publicly supporting Representative Kevin McCarthy, who's struggling to get votes in as needed. The idea of Donald Trump serving as a speaker was first proposed on the day he left the White House, January 20th of 2021, by a pro-Trump activist named Rogan O'Hanley, who went by the name DC Drano on social media. The idea was soon aggressively pushed by Steve Bannon, Trump's former chief strategist in the White House. At first, Trump had no interest in the job, but all changed as he watched McCarthy fail in the vote just recently, vote on the House floor in early January of this year. So, it sounds like from this excerpt that he's even, saying that this might have been planned all along. And again, I'm not going to go down the road like of what we do know and don't know, but again, we know that the facts are Trump is a great marketer, and that'd be interesting to see take place. But he is endorsing Jim Jordan.
I mean, Jim Jordan was responsible or partly responsible for forcing John Boehner out of the House to essentially not seek reelection. Jim Jordan is head of the Freedom Caucus, so he's very Trump-esque, very Trump-like. So you couldn't ask for a more Trump-type ally to be Speaker of the House. So Trump could still get a lot that he wants and work through Jim Jordan without all the responsibilities of Speaker of the House. Sometimes it is better to be the guy in someone's ear as opposed to being the guy himself, because he could have Jim Jordan make all the decisions Trump wants to make without Trump taking the heat. But I think if it were Trump, it would what runs our elections is excitement and hype and enthusiasm. And Trump being speaker, I think, would give so much enthusiasm to his campaign and make things so like upbeat and crazy that would energize both sides of the aisle and energize the base consistently. Like imagine a scenario where Trump says, I want full funding for the border wall. That's the only bill we're pushing because Biden's funding it. But then Democrats aren't going to support that because they don't want to give Trump a win. So Trump could actually go really moderate and go really moderate on everything, which would make him look good and presidential. So Democrats are always going to say no. Imagine if Trump can get bills passed and then Biden just vetoes them. Yeah, thanks.
Build the wall. Yeah.
Build the wall. And even that was a meme in and of itself that literally, I don't know if you ever saw how that build the wall became generated, but fascinating stuff. But yeah, I personally, I'd love to see him as Speaker of the House because it would be so fun, right? And to me, elections are all about fun.
100%. But this just goes to show, because I hate politics for a lot of different reasons, but this is a primary example. Is the entire campaign of last election was against the wall and immigration, and it's like, okay, where are we at today? You feel so for every liberal progressive that trashed on Trump in that sense. And again, I'm not being like complete pro-Trump here. I'm just saying this is the reality. Is all those people that trashed on him for years and were like, it's the stupidest policy in the world. dude, they're sitting on, they got a sock in their mouth today. Like,
Well, there is this interesting cultural phenomenon where,
well, they'll back it. They'll say, well, now we need it.
well, what's interesting is people are now very embarrassed to be like, I'm pro Biden. You don't hear that too much. It's still about Trump, you know? So if you go, oh, you're pro Biden, they're like, listen, I just didn't want Trump. So it's never about Biden. Everything's about Trump, but no
Yeah.
one's, I don't see any pro Biden people being like shouting from the rooftop. And then my buddy just got back from California, and his left leaning friends in California were like, yeah, we're kind of thinking about Trump, which is like very interesting because California is so blue.
I know a
It's
few pro Bidens. I know a few.
oh, but they're in
Um,
California.
no, I know some that are even in. Well, I just know them social media wise. They have 2-3 million followers, and
Oh,
they're
and
like,
they're like, I love Biden. Yeah.
oh yeah, and but they're like, th-
Are they
I mean,
getting
I'll hold
paid
my
by the
tongue.
admin? Because you have to be so gaslit to make everything. It's like I read some of the articles. It's like these job numbers when they're like, "Oh, we've created more jobs than any previous administration." Yeah, people were being rehired after they were fired from COVID. So that's not job creation. Like that does
Yeah,
not count.
no, but it's those people, but it's primarily on TikTok, and it's primarily one of the guys' names. He's Parker. They average like 3-4 thousand live viewers, and they're the people that debate like, why is gay being immoral, and like why is being transgender wrong, and they sit there and they just debate these policies with a very generic, kind of like copy and paste outlook. And I think I just lost our man here. But chat, hey guys, while he's come,
Oh no.
I don't know if you turn off your camera, I can hear you. Guys, make sure you guys smash that like
Oh,
button.
can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you. Can you hear us?
Yeah, yeah. I guess my camera just went AFK.
You can leave and rejoin if you need to.
Yeah. Give me a second. I'll
Okay.
rejoin.
But yeah, chat, if you guys like this type of content, again, this is going to be once a week where we just go into U.S. politics and geopolitics. And it's called to be, we're going to be going beyond the headlines, that, so to speak. And it's Beyond the Headlines live show. This will be every Friday, 3 p.m. Eastern. Just because traditionally, markets are slow today, and I want to cover a lot that's happening in the markets worldwide, because it's really important to understand what's taking place politically, but also geopolitically, which we'll be getting into just a second with Yevgeny Prigozhin, which is the head of the Wagner Group that went down in the plane crash earlier this year, just a few weeks ago. And what they're doing in Africa. And we'll explain that in just a second, because this is very important for stocks and markets worldwide, globally, and it will impact us in the future because this falls into BRICS. This falls into a BRICS-backed currency, the new development bank. This is going to fall into trade. Let me add him in right here. Let me see if this works. There he is. He's back. Can you hear?
Yeah, yeah. I got you.
Okay. So yeah, so ending off on that thought before we move into geopolitics for today and wrap up the stream here. And appreciate, guys, all the likes coming in, all the shares, all the love. I do love this format. It's very interesting because you can't share the screen, but I think it's really important that we can still sit here and have these conversations. So going back just into the what I was talking about, there is a lot of creators out there, but the problem with those creators, like I have nothing against, like, whether you're left or right. I really don't care. The only perspective I want on the economy and who's president is someone that understands economics and geopolitical tensions. Because right now in our life, we're at a point where you have BRICS being built. That's a massive threat against the U.S. dollar, and you have a president that's not making the right business deals. And what I have to give Biden credit here, by the way, is going to be his geopolitical policies with the CHIPS Plan 4 Act, the trilateral agreement between Japan, South Korea, and the United States, and kind of pinching China. And, it's not the worst policies that we've seen come out from that perspective. Now, what's happening in Ukraine, we can debate all day long, because, I don't, where's that funding going to? Where's the hundreds of billions that we're sending there? And, why are we lying about what the reality is for what we're there for? I mean, the Nord Stream pipeline blew up. The Biden administration refuses to have an investigation into that. You wonder why? Who's now taking over all the liquefied natural gas for Europe? It's not Russia. It's the United States, right? Where's these biolabs that we saw with Fauci? That is a huge concern. That's all real. That comes from RFK has been exposing that nonstop with evidence and proportional, statements. Like it's the truth. And then most importantly, though, is, in my opinion, from a geopolitical perspective, obviously cutthroat is the United States saying, "Hey, you don't go against democracy." But what's taking place on a macro scale is going to be the Belt and Road Initiative from China and Xi Jinping, and it's actually cutting him off almost by the balls for accessing Europe's markets through Poland, which has like 75% or something of all the railroad connections, and is why Xi humiliated Putin over a year ago, because he's like, yo, dude, we're trying to build this economic trading route, and you just caused the entire eastern side of Europe to side with the United States. And so there's a geopolitical concern there. If you have any thoughts on that, but yeah, there is, but from carbon credits, immigration policies, U.S. based policies, there's not a lot that's going for their administration. It's why they're very much embarrassed. So if you have thoughts on that, but yeah,
Yeah,
there is.
it's
My point was,
interesting. Like you can get the flavor of the day, but I don't know if you saw Poland, Hungary, and Slovakia are now all at odds with Ukraine and refusing to ship them weapons anymore. It's interesting that Ukraine and Poland are now having to have negotiations, which you would think, hey, they'd be getting along because Poland's scared of Russia, but I don't think Poland's that scared of Russia, and Poland's kind of tired of being used as a tool. And I think a lot of people now, even in Eastern Europe, who originally you would think are scared of Russia, are like, nah, actually, we went out of this game altogether. We don't think Russia's coming after us. So not only do you have Eastern Europeans turning against Ukraine, which you would think is one of Ukraine's biggest allies, you now have the House, which isn't going to guarantee any more funding from the United States, which is their biggest donor. And now you have Russia and China, I think, being ready. I'm going to be interested to see if Putin really starts attacking Ukraine, given what's happening in the U.S. over the Speaker of the House and funding.
He's threatening nukes.
Or if he's going to wait because he doesn't want Democrats, because this is how geopoliticians will play into America's democratic system, is Putin might just wait until whoever the new House Speaker is, and then go full force, right? He doesn't want to necessarily create an opportunity for a pro-Ukrainian, Republican to get elected based on his actions. But I bet you, if he wants to act, he needs to act in the next 1 or 2 days, because that's kind of his short window to really make a lot of headway before Congress figures out how it's going to function.
Yeah, I mean, it's very obvious seeing, who's going to profit off this too. It's just like, okay, we're going to give them all this aid, and Ukraine's going to be completely destabilized. I mean, we're talking about I don't think nukes will take place, but if they do, I mean, we're talking about an entire country that's going to be just grounded. The cities are going to be just elevated. And so when we go to rebuild, it's going to be very similar to the economic hitman policies that we've seen in the proxy wars all through Africa, all through the Southeast Asia, through South America, what's happening in Argentina, Chile, etc. Is we're going to rebuild it, but guess who's going to now get a 95% kickback of the profits coming from all the wheat silos, because obviously they control most of your wheat sector. And you got to realize, when we move into these territories and we are part of proxy wars, guys, this isn't like a stretch of the truth. It's the reality is that money is going to be paid back in one way or another. And you already see BlackRock and JP Morgan stepping in and be like, hey, we're going to take care of you guys. Okay, well, or the World Bank, right? And it's like, okay, well, once those loans start going through and they actually start needing to be paid back, and they're taking, what does that look like? Are they getting 80% of profits from their natural resources? And it's where these first world countries, they absorb the natural resources in these countries, and these countries get stuck because 20 years from now, they're going to realize, even though they're being rebuilt, they can never break out and expand because they are suppressed by massive debts. And if the United States goes and prints more money, guess what's going to happen to the global? You're going to cause hyperinflation, because when they go and increase interest rates again, they're going to start pulling M2 money supply out. And these countries, they're already printing more money just to pay back the debts that they owe the United States. And it ends up being this snowball effect where second world and first world countries have a very hard time of ever breaking out of that poverty, because of these deal flows. So, if you have anything you want to leave off on that, we have one more topic here for the show today. I just want to remind everybody, guys, this is Samuel Arms. You can give him a follow. His link is in the description below. He's on YouTube, covers all things politics. He's Florida Blockchain Association. He's the largest Web3 lobbying group in the state of Florida, and I believe on the East Coast. And I've actually been working with him a ton, and we got a lot of awesome things coming up in October. So this is somebody that's on the inside. He's got a lot of connections politically. even all the way up towards Capitol Hill. He's responsible for multiple bills that have passed, including the anti-CBDC bill that got pushed through in multiple states now. And so, yes, and he definitely skips leg day, so he'll never stand up. He's very big up top, very small down below. You know what I'm saying? So, Samuel,
It's all fake news. Fake news. Fake news. Listen, the only thing that I would add on Ukraine that I haven't looked into, but someone like you would, is Ukraine's one of the largest suppliers of grain. If they're now like a U.S. vassal, who's a giant grain company that has never been able to get into Europe that would use this as an opportunity to do that?
I actually don't know the U.S. company.
Monsanto.
Oh, I was gonna say that, but like, yeah. So let's go spray pesticides on their nuclear soil.
Yeah, no, it's like no, or use GMO wheat, which is, I believe, most of our GMO stuff is outlawed in Europe. They won't let us allow us to get it in. But Ukraine ships a lot of its wheat to all of Europe, so that might just be. I would not be surprised if in the next 2 to 3 years, Monsanto's like, we need to help Ukraine.
It's
Take our
also to
GMO wheat.
China. China's agriculturally very, very constrained, and so that's where like people go: is China going to invade Taiwan? That's like a very hard question because yeah, Xi from a totalitarian perspective might do it just because of his ego, but from
Patrick,
a
give me credit for that idea. Give me
from
credit for that idea.
from a geopolitical perspective, it's like that's going to be very similar to Mao and his leadership, and when he was a totalitarian back in the early 1900s. And if we slap the same sanctions that we slapped on Russia to China, they will have millions starve, and so that would just be ugly for everybody, and obviously relates to something that nobody wants to be a part of. And so, that's the thoughts on that. But yeah, who would actually know a lot about wheat is crypto weatherman Tim, who's now Inverse News. He actually studies that, and that's what he works on, I believe, at the Pentagon. He actually tracks all of that stuff. So really cool. You guys should check him out. But yeah, the last source here, guys, goes back into geopolitics, moving towards BRICS. Yevgeny Prigozhin. It turns out that Putin, guys, has come out and said that there was grenade fragments found in the plane crash with the victims' bodies, as well as a massive amount of cocaine. So, don't know
I
why
know about
that
the cocaine part.
They're having a party till the end. So that I guess that's fun here.
Someone was like,
But
"Hey, let's open up that cocaine thing," and it was a grenade. Like, you stupid! That's the
he's
wrong
like
thing.
anybody. Yeah, he's like anybody got a knife? I need to open up this. Anybody got a key? And he's
Yeah.
like, oh, I got a pin. He's like, oh shit.
That's right.
That's a bad joke. But Russian President Vladimir Putin, well, actually, screw him. I mean, the guy committed genocide in South Africa. But President Vladimir Putin said Thursday that explosive traces were discovered on the remains of Wagner mercenary chief. And it's true. After the plane had crashed over Russia in August, Prigozhin's plane crashed between Moscow and St. Petersburg in August, 2 months after he led a brief mutiny against Russia's top military brass. Of course, no correlation there, no connection. But Putin's comments were on the first significant update of Russia's investigation of the crash. The head of the investigative committee reported to me a few days ago. Putin said that he had a meeting at Valday Discussion Club. Fragments of hand grenades were found on the bodies after the air disaster. There was no external impact on the plane, so it means it just blew up in the air. And so I don't know if this is going to come from, because you got to be very careful with Western propaganda. You also got to be very careful with Eastern propaganda. And if you guys don't know in the chat, Russians are actually very pro Putin. He has a very large community out there. And so, there's a lot, he has a very large voter base, despite, whatever that means in terms of a, Soviet structure. But, with that said, is this, article actually, real from Putin? Is this what's being portrayed to his citizens in his country? Because now he's going to say, hey, it wasn't me. Turns out we are actually investigating this, and this was maybe they have traces to Ukraine or Belarus, or might be Belarus, right? And makes it now another political play on Putin's side in Russia in 2 months from now. You got to be very cautious with these. You can't just completely jump to the conclusion that says, oh, it was obviously Russia. Of course, we might know things, and it's very clear. But how is this going to be propagandized over the next 3 to 6 months? And so, a very good example of this is what happens with the Wagner Group and propaganda in Africa. In the Central African Republic, their country was heavily reliant on, in most cities, a European beer for a very, very long time. And it's very easy to go into these second world or third world countries and destabilize their economies, because their economies are very reliant on very few sources of income, very few companies that are actually producing any GDP. And so the Wagner Group actually just recently got in trouble, guys, for they didn't get in trouble actually whatsoever. They just took over the country. But the beer company that had been providing massive amount of jobs and is the number one beer in Central African Republic, they were taking Molotovs and they went and burnt down all of the beer facilities. And the Wagner Group in Russia came in and built new beer. They built and made Russian beer and sold that to Africans. And so they started making, and the communities rely on the Wagner Group because they're producing jobs, and they wanted that beer, and they controlled the beer supply of that country. And so this was like their infiltration to where they slowly started also taking over natural resources throughout Africa, specifically in Central African Republic. The Wagner Group protects the prime minister. I think he's a prime minister in Republic. But and they very slowly infiltrated and took over their economy by simply taking over the manufacturing for beer. And so that goes to show, hey, now they have the propaganda, now they control the narrative, now they have this group, and now they're consuming those natural resources. This is why geopolitics interests me. Is it corrupted? Yes, on mass scales in all ways. But when you see one story that's published by Fox News, realize you got to think about, okay, what's the game theory here? What does this actually mean from both sides, from both a Western perspective and an Eastern? Because you guys have to remember, when we're reading the news, all the news you're consuming is very centralized. We're going through YouTube, which is just Google, Facebook with Mark Zuckerberg, and TikTok, which, come on, ByteDance, you know where that's coming from. So, you're very limited. And the only one that's kind of.
And we love all three of those. All three of those are our favorite. I love ByteDance, YouTube, Google, and Mark Zuckerberg.
Please, I love you guys. I support pro-American, pro-US dollar. Yeah. Yeah, that's funny. You know what's funny is because I make the opposite joke when I'm on TikTok. I'm like, G's not so bad, and then I like literally make a video on him being like committing genocide. It's like, it's just so I don't get banned. Yeah, man.
As long as you understand that Wagner Group is just an arm of the Russian government, but an arm that they can say isn't related. Well, they're kind of like CIA, but they also kind of act like NGOs, like American NGOs, because we do the same thing with NGOs in Africa, where we send an NGO in, we funnel money through them. The economy becomes based off of that NGO. We do that in Haiti and in Central America as well. And then what happens, and those NGOs are often very closely linked with our intelligence agencies as well. So then that's why a lot of times when you have certain transitions of power, the first thing they do if they're anti-US is they kick out the NGOs because they know the NGOs are normally there not just for giving out money. But it's very strategic for us because we essentially say, hey, we're going to help you, but you're going to give us something in return. Wagner Group is doing the exact same thing. And so even though they're also a military force, yeah, they're going to build infrastructure. They're going to be involved in the economic game. They're going to be involved in supply chain management because then that means these people are relying on them forever. And that puts them directly at odds with China and the One Belt, One Road initiative, because obviously the biggest partners in Africa right now for most African countries are the Chinese.
Yeah, no, definitely. And we'll probably do a whole deep dive on BRICS here soon. But, for the show here today, guys, we're going to wrap it up here. If you guys like this type of content, make sure you guys smash that like button, turn on the post notifications. Again, this is going to be happening every single Friday at 3 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Of course, next time we're going to know how to actually set this up and not be in a phone call and be muted. So I have to delete the last one and then, read through this one. But, the point of these shows, guys, is once a week. We're by no means the complete experts in each of these fields, but we want to have the open discussion and the open dialogue. There's two truths to every side. And so we're going to try to approach these from a very nuanced approach. And, Sam's bringing the expertise of being a leading lobbyist in the United States, specifically in Web3, especially in Florida. He understands how lobbying works on the backside of things. I'm going to come from the approach of I've, advised and done dozens and dozens of ICOs and seen a project go from an idea to a launch and be marketed and inside traded. Like I've seen that happen through influencers, everybody in the Web3 industry. And so I pretty much know how Silicon Valley works. That's how I look at crypto. So hopefully being able to take these two understandings, taking the geopolitical understandings, the economic understandings, and the political understandings, is we can bring those three together and create an open, great discussion for you guys where we bring a good amount of education and just have that open-minded perspective into playing what Sam taught me is game theory. And that's the whole point of this show. Sam, if you have anything you want to lead off with, we're going to wrap this up here. We're coming up to the 45-minute mark. And again, man, thanks for coming on, and I'm excited to continue. I like this show format. I think we
Yeah.
definitely should try to figure out how we could like show the screen a little bit more, and but that's about it. That's about it.
Yeah, no, I thought this was great. I appreciate everyone who turned in. Yeah, hopefully every week, every Friday, to give you an idea of what's going on in the world from like a more strategic analysis as opposed to just fear mongering headlines. And then we're just going to keep going with the flow, and that'll be it. So yeah, make sure you like, subscribe, follow our channels, stay up to date.
Yeah, and that's actually a great point with the fear mongering. Is that's not the point of this channel at all. It's supposed to show you guys that a lot of the a lot of the media actually fear mongers today. They're talking about the downfall of the U.S. dollar, that we're going to collapse, World War III, and it's like from a geopolitical perspective and even a U.S. based political perspective, what's happening today is going to be for something that takes place in 6 months. It's just like interest rates. Interest rates that are being factored into the market day are factored 6 months out from your institutions and market makers. It's very similar in politics. And so hopefully we can, give ourselves good projections, make some really good predictions, which Sam has done multiple times with the presidential candidacy already, guys. So, and, obviously from my side of things with Bitcoin mining, we know what's up. So, guys, thank you for tuning in. Much love. Go check out Sam. Subscribe to his channel, guys. He's got great videos. His shorts have been popping off. Let's get him to 100 subscribers on YouTube, and let's build this channel together, guys. Thank you for being here.